Good afternoon. Listening to the twisted language in last year's Trump-Biden debates left me with the feeling that words no longer worked. They'd lost their power. They'd been chewed to cud. Everything spoken was suspect. Trust was gone. Years of never-ending lies by elected officials and government agencies have created a fictive reality so thick that digging through to factual bedrock seems nearly impossible. Of course, as the political theorist Hannah Arendt noted, truthfulness has never been considered a virtue in politics. Lying was always considered a useful tool. But today's crisis of trust is deeper than political machinations. Its tremors threaten to topple democracy, which is already tottering. Today, I will argue that persistent, virulent lying is a form of hatred that promotes widespread mistrust of government and confusion about what is real. I will begin with a definition of hatred that explains the title of my talk, The Lie as a Form of Hatred. In Book 2 of the Rhetoric, Aristotle distinguishes between the emotional states of anger and hatred. Anger, he says, is always coupled with a desire for revenge, to avenge an act of disrespect. Anger is always directed at a specific person. In contrast, hatred is directed against an entire class. Anger wishes its object to suffer. Hatred wishes its object to die. Time cures anger. Hatred is incurable. I call political lies a form of hatred because their object is to annihilate all types of facts, historical documentation, empirical evidence, scientific findings. The annihilation of facts may also destroy people's lives. For example, the once thriving city of Flint had always used water from Lake Huron, which it purchased from Detroit. However, in 2014, claiming cost savings, state officials switched to water from the Flint River that was funneled through aging pipes, which delivered foul-smelling, rusty tap water full of iron and lead, which can cause brain damage in kids. Bathing in Flint's water caused skin rash. A local hospital tested 1,750 children and found the percentage of kids with lead poisoning had doubled and in some neighborhoods tripled after the switch to river water. Rather than act on the findings, state officials accused the hospital of causing, quote, unnecessary hysteria, while Governor Rick Snyder insisted the water was safe and accused Flint citizens of turning the issue into, quote, a political football. This continued for 18 months, with state officials publicly insisting they took all required safety measures, but privately admitting they hadn't. This came to light in correspondence that has since been made public, along with an alarming report by an EPA scientist that was redacted and buried. Because there is a vast taxonomy or pathology of lies, including self-deception, before I continue, I will define what I mean by lying. Following Heidegger, I define lying as concealment, a view he took from the ancient Greeks, who defined truth as disclosure. Disclosure is how things are made intelligible within a sphere of understanding, a world unto itself that has its own ontology or understanding of what is real, such as the political world. For example, official White House discourse creates its own reality. This was driven home during George W. Bush's successive invasions of Afghanistan and Iraq, when political operative Karl Rove boasted that we're an empire now, and when we act, we create our own reality. And while you're studying that reality, judiciously, as you will, we'll act again, creating other new realities, which you can study too. And that's how things will sort out. We're history's actors, and you, all of you, will be left to just study what we do. Ralph Nader said pretty much the same thing in a speech at the University of Michigan. In discussing the fabricated beef and oil shortages of the 1970s, Nader said, "The White House can create any shortage it wants just by announcing there is a shortage." When top elected officials create their own reality, it fogs the minds of citizens and the lower level functionaries tasked with implementing policy. Hannah Arendt described the consequences of this in her 1971 essay, Lying in Politics. She writes, "Not only are the people and their elected representatives denied access to what they must know to form an opinion and make decisions, but also the actors themselves who receive top clearance to learn all the relevant facts remain blissfully unaware of them." Furthermore, she states that if the mysteries of government have so befogged the minds of the actors themselves that they no longer know or remember the truth behind their concealments and their lies, the whole operation of deception will run aground or become counterproductive. That is, confuse people without convincing them. The shifting rationale for the 2003 invasion of Iraq and the continued American presence there illustrates Arendt's warning. 2 days before the invasion, speaking from the White House, George Bush said, "Intelligence gathered by this and other governments leaves no doubt that the Iraq regime continues to possess and conceal some of the most lethal weapons ever devised." 3 months later, at a conference with Palestinian leaders in Egypt, according to transcripts, Bush said he was obeying God's orders. God would tell me, "George, go and fight these terrorists in Afghanistan," and I did. And then God would tell me, "George, go and end the tyranny in Iraq," and I did. The following month, Paul Wolfowitz, Deputy Secretary of Defense to Donald Rumsfeld, told the Senate Foreign Relations Committee that the reason for the invasion was Saddam Hussein's abuse of human rights. Then in early 2004, General Jay Gardner, who had been briefly in charge of the Iraqi occupation, told the National Journal that the U.S. was in Iraq to build military bases to control the region, as the U.S. had done in the Philippines at the turn of the 20th century. "That's what Iraq is for the next few decades," Gardner said, "a fueling station that gives us great presence in the Middle East." Then in October 2004, in a speech in Wilmington, Ohio, Vice President Dick Cheney said nation building was the rationale for staying in Iraq. A new constitution would be written, nationwide elections would be held, and Iraqi forces would be trained to defend their new country, said Cheney. That's the plan. The plan of the month, perhaps, which superseded weapons of mass destruction, divine orders, human rights abuses, and regional military bases. These were the succession of reasons the public heard in the first 18 months of the war, a litany of official pronouncements intended to conceal the real reasons the insulated troika of Bush, Cheney, and Rumsfeld invaded Iraq. Today, I have shown that lying is a type of concealment and that grave, persistent lying by leaders is a form of hatred that sows widespread mistrust of government and confusion about what is real. Thank you.